Hi, and welcome back. I'm now joined by the incredibly talented author Suzanne Joinson. Hello.
Hello.
And you've just released your debut novel, A Lady Cyclist Guide to Kashgar. And I have to say, I really, really enjoyed this. I read this in literally, I'd say 6 hours. It was so good.
Thank you.
And congratulations. It's your first book, isn't it?
Yeah.
Could you tell me a little bit about what it's all about?
Yeah, it's about three English women who were missionaries who travelled to the very, very northwest part of China in the 1920s. They went to convert, but when they got there, they were surprised by what happened to them when they arrived there. And alongside that, there's a contemporary strand of a woman, a character called Frida, who lives in London, and she meets a Yemeni guy, and between them they go on a sort of journey, and the two stories connect.
So why did you pick that era, actually? Why did you pick those two eras, and how do they come together?
Well, I was travelling a lot for my job, and I was on the road in different hotel rooms all the time, and I started to think about women travel writers of the 20s and 30s, and I was really fascinated by the fact that they could go to places that we can't get to now, like Afghanistan or Yemen or Iraq or places like that. And through reading about them, I started to read about missionaries and discovered these amazing, narratives where they would travel for miles and go to really untouched places. And the more I researched them, the more I realised that not all of them were about sort of religion. There were other factors behind their choices to become missionaries.
It seems like there was a sense of adventure with a lot of them, and they had other motives sometimes, or maybe they discovered things about themselves on their travels.
Yeah.
Because I noticed there was a lot of there's a lot to do with sexual relationships. It wasn't always there was a theme of lesbianism in it. I noticed that.
Well, the thing is, after World War One, all the men had obviously been killed in the war, on the killing fields, and there was a big surge of applications from women to become a missionary, and I think often it was the case that they wanted to escape, or they had lost a loved one, or their family parent who they were looking after had died, and so they wanted to kind of do something. And the clever thing about becoming a missionary is it's a really, really, on the one hand, it's a really conservative thing to do, because you're going to give in yourself and you're devoted and devout and so on. It's sort of all the traditional female things. But on the other hand, you get to go on a huge adventure, riding on horses, going on trains, carrying pistols, etc. And what would happen was there were these things called ladies' houses, particularly in China. So only women, and usually in a remote place. And unsurprisingly, there would be these very intense networks and relationships, and they were actually quite radical and revolutionary. So they were completely immune from all the confines of life back in England, and they were free to do what they want. And inevitably, there were love affairs as well as nervous breakdowns or dramatic, relationships and so on and so forth. And I thought this was a really interesting area.
No, I thought it was really interesting. Evangeline was such an interesting character because she was actually there, and she had other motives. Obviously, she was writing this book, A Lady Cyclist Guide to Kashgar, and I just loved her sense of adventure. The women going out there and just making an interesting life for themselves. She was obviously searching a lot, wasn't she? A lot like the other contemporary character, Frida.
Yeah, there's a connection because whilst I myself was travelling a lot, I was writing in hotel rooms and airport lounges, and I was sort of thinking about this thing about the tension between home and the desire to travel and move and escape, and then as soon as you get somewhere you just want to go back and you feel homesick. And I was sort of exploring that in a contemporary setting, and then I realised this was happening with a lot of the women who were writing in the 20s and 30s as well. So I could see this sort of connection, this constant longing to find somewhere on the globe that you might belong, and both characters similarly are always looking for that, and they never quite find it.
Right, and what interesting sources of information did you use to write the book?
Well, I went to the British Library and some archives there, and I also went to SOAS, School of Oriental and African Studies, where there's an amazingly huge library and archive of missionary stuff. So there's lots of diaries, notebooks, letters, things like that. I also went to Kashgar myself.
Wow.
I had a research grant, and my trip coincided. It was in July 2009. As my plane landed, I didn't know about it, but there was a riot in Kashgar and Urumqi. There was a huge uprising from the Muslim communities there against the Chinese authorities. So when I got there was all the phone lines had been cut off, no internet, no anything, riot police outside. So, there is an uprising in this book. So I was researching that, but I wasn't expecting to get quite a taste of the reality of that sort of situation.
So you wrote, would you say that you wrote from your own personal experiences, applying your own experiences to the characters and the storyline?
Definitely, some of the themes that I was looking at, partly from the work I was doing and the travelling I was doing, is this idea of Britishness and, in this colonial history and being British in a place which is sort of tense or difficult and has these issues, and exploring some of those things. So very much so, I decided I'd travelled so far, 28 hours. I thought I have to go and take photos of the mosque and the marketplace and all these sorts of things. So I really needed to get those details. So I just decided to go completely English tourist, and I put on my great huge straw hat and my camera and just went for it and walked out there. And actually all the riot police and people were quite friendly too.
Were they? So you experienced it firsthand.
Yeah.
It made it much easier for you to actually write about this then. You actually saw, experienced it, the feelings, the emotions of it all.
It was a serious uprising, and I was aware of that. I didn't quite understand until I got back and I sort of researched what was happening there. But very much the feeling of electricity in the air and the feeling of tension and the oppressiveness. Kashgar as a city is being knocked down. It's a really ancient city, and Chinese authorities are destroying it at the moment. So I could see crumbling buildings and all sorts of, very much the feeling that this ancient, beautiful city, which has lots of problems, sanitation and health issues and loads of different things, but is being bulldozed down. And I really felt I could see that. I was right on the edge. I could literally see half a building knocked down and still up and stuff. So.
My goodness. And then you've got these other characters, obviously, the contemporary story. So you've got Evangeline in the 1920s posing as this missionary.
Yeah.
Searching and writing her book about cycling in Kashgar because she had her bike. And then, she's in a searching kind of journey.
Yeah.
And then you've got Frida, who's come back from travelling, and she's met Tayyib, who's from Yemen, who's sort of an illegal, he's an illegal immigrant, isn't he?
Yeah, he came as a student, he never went back. So he's not the sort of classic illegal immigrant of, coming in a lorry and all that
not
sort
like
of
that.
thing.
He's actually educated.
But he has kind of, he certainly isn't legally in the country, and he has kind of wafted around the edges of society for a long time.
And what were you trying to show with those two characters?
I was trying to show that, the character, Frida the character, her job is to write about the youth of the Islamic world for a government think tank. And then, so she has a lot of thoughts about this. She's been travelling around that part of the world, and she realises this isn't a very idiotic thing for the West, in inverted commas, to attempt to do. So she's quite cynical about, and she has a lot of questions about this work that she's doing. Then she bumps into this Yemeni guy who's a kind of loner and an outsider. He was a filmmaker in Yemen, and he was and he's an artist. He does calligraphy and draws, and so he comes from this cultured background.
Yeah.
But he finds himself, with no money, completely displaced. And I wanted to kind of explore the interaction that would happen between those two, so that she's very self-conscious about how she interacts with the rest of the world and what she's thinking about. He's very self-conscious about his status in the society in England, and sort of what that kind of draws out in the way that they meet together.
I really loved this. I love both stories. I particularly loved the missionary adventure. I really enjoyed it, and I think everyone should definitely read this book. What type of person would you say would read this? Like, who would you be targeting?
Oh, I think anybody who's interested in literature with a global kind of feel, sort of world literature, travel writing. It's got a travel writing element, but then it's also got strong literary fiction.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Really appreciate you coming down, and I'm going to recommend this to all my friends because it's a fantastic read. Thank you.
Thank you.